This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining me today for a cup of coffee is returning guest and New York Times best-selling author Ian Doescher. He is the author of so many wonderful books, William Shakespeare's Star Wars series, of course, but this book we're going to talk about today is the book birthday, by the way. Congratulations, Mr. Doescher. But the book is I Wish I Had a Wookiee and Other Poems for Our Galaxy. Please welcome back to the show, Mr. Ian Doescher.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for having me on again.
Of course, man. This is like, you're probably one of the top guests that I've had. You've been on probably, 5-6 times?
Yeah, where's my jacket? Don't I get a jacket after 5 times?
It's orange, too. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, it's on its way, and it's sending it via FedEx, so just be on the lookout for that.
Great.
Do you remember when you were on and we ranked like the top? There was a newspaper article about the top Star Wars characters, and you and I, and maybe it was Corey. I'm not exactly sure who the other person was, but I remember thinking that was so much fun because you, of course, are a brilliant writer and you're a massive Star Wars fan, but you're able to turn your talents in a bit of a different direction. I Wish I Had a Wookiee and Other Poems for Our Galaxy. First of all, the cover itself, adorable. Before we break it down, the book and the poems and the process, how did you feel when you held this thing in your hands? Because this was kind of a passion project for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to finally see it all like here and real and actually existing in the world, it was great. I don't know that I've been this excited about, I mean, that's terrible to say, right? I'm supposed to be equally excited about all of my books, but I don't know that I've been as excited about one for a while because, as you said, this is one that was really near and dear to my heart.
So you obviously, with William Shakespeare's Star Wars, you're working with iambic pentameter and other poetical devices. Poetical, is that a word? We're gonna use. Yeah,
it is for sure.
I think it should work. So this one though is a lot different, and honestly, the highest compliment I can give, and I'm sure you've heard this, I'm sure you've thought of it. Maybe it was a muse of yours, but Shel Silverstein, right? This is Star Wars and Shel Silverstein combined with the Ian Doescher flair. Tell me about sort of the idea as it first originated. Did Quirk come to you? Is this something you presented to them? How did that work out?
So this started with a conversation between me and my former editor at Quirk, Jason Rekulak. And Jason was the one that I'd worked with originally for Shakespeare Star Wars. And he left Quirk, I think, 2 or 3 years ago at this point. But we started having this conversation in, I think, early 2016. And we were talking about, basically the way the conversation happened was he was saying, what are the other like famous poems out there that you could sort of do a Star Wars-y kind of a spin on, right? And there aren't a ton. There are plenty of famous poems, but they tend to be standalone, shorter things like "The Road Not Taken" or "The Road Less Traveled." I can never remember the actual title of that one. Sorry, Robert Frost.
He's not listening.
Yeah, no, that's right. Or "The Raven" or something like that, right? And we actually did a sort of a brief treatment of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" as sort of a Star Wars spin on that. And then I was sort of bouncing those ideas around in my head, and I came back to him with this idea, like, yes, very much with Shel Silverstein in mind, whose poems I grew up with. My mom had a record where he's reading and performing some of his own poems, and they're just delightful, and some of them are touching, and all of them are witty, and some of them are really naughty. I mean, they're great. And so I came back to him with this sort of idea of like, well, what if we sort of did that idea where we're sort of doing a mix of different types of poems, all sort of with centered around Star Wars, and then his spin on it, which is actually I think a pretty unusual turn for Lucasfilm. I don't think it's something that they do a lot. His idea was, let's have it basically be poems from our galaxy, kids and parents in our galaxy as they are experiencing Star Wars and sort of imagining themselves within Star Wars. But it's not, these are not poems set in the Star Wars galaxy. And that's an interesting sort of a difference. And that was Jason's idea.
You know what? I don't know why I didn't think of that. I mean, I've read these poems countless times. Mason and I love them.
Thank you.
I didn't even think about the fact that I think you're just so kind of drawn in to, because you've captured the spirit of what it's like to be a kid that likes Star Wars, but a kid of any age, whether you are a very, very young or an adult with children of your own, Star Wars kind of rekindles that child in all of us. And that very much comes through in the spirit of so many of these. And that's obviously was kind of one of your directions, or like kind of a muse for yourself, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Star Wars, I mean, one of the beautiful things about Star Wars is that it's so intergenerational, right? I mean, my parents, who are now in their like late 70s, early 80s, raised me on Star Wars because they loved it when they were younger. And so they raised me on it. And now, I've shown it to my kids and, and they've grown up with it. And so, and so I really wanted to get across that sense of like, this is something that can be shared between generations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even the first one, right? A Galaxy Far, Far Away. It's just, and I don't know if I can read it on the show or not, because I want people to buy them and I want them to read them because they're delicious. But actually, would you mind reading the first one to us? Because you've got
sure.
He's been doing a lot of great stuff this week on social media where you're performing, because you are a performer too. And I don't know, I'm just going to sit back and let you take it away.
Okay. So I actually wrote this poem thinking that it might be the very first poem in the book, and that's the way it turned out. So yeah, it's called A Galaxy Far, Far Away, and it's a very short poem, and it goes like this. Long time ago, but when? Far, far away, but where? Can we go back to then? Can we please travel there? That's it.
So talk about that one. What was kind of
well, so with so many of these poems, I'm sort of starting off with a kernel of an idea, right? Like, and I think the idea with this one was, let's do something with the phrase "a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away," right? And thinking about how a kid might, there was a lot of poems in this collection. I'm trying to put myself in a kid's mindset, right? Thinking about how a kid might experience those words. Those words are, especially your first time with Star Wars, those words are exciting, right? Those words are so exciting. And so it raises all these questions, right? And also, so I'm trying to get that across along with this sense of like, I want to enter into this world. I want to enter in with my imagination into this world. And many of these poems in the book are about kids imagining themselves in situations in Star Wars, right? And then we sort of are seeing how that ends up playing out in their real life.
And isn't that the way it should be, right? I mean, that's how we kind of enjoy our Star Wars as well. And the illustration, which we'll certainly talk about a little bit later, but this is the perfect one. It's got a kid making a makeshift fort. He's got some chairs, some pillows, a big blanket. He's got some Star Wars stuff. He's apparently been snacking. He's got the socks there, or she, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And which is so delightful. But this is kind of what we're like every day as adults, isn't it? Can we go back to then? Can we please travel there? Star Wars, of course, one of the reasons why we keep coming back to it is it really is a lot about nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just right off the bat, it captures the joy of that and the innocence of it's far, far away, but where, the mind reels, because that's what Star Wars does.
Yep, absolutely. Star Wars awakens our imaginations, and I mean, we have to say hats off to Tim Budgeon, who's the illustrator from this book, and he just brings so much life to this book. This first illustration is just perfect. That who among us as Star Wars fans didn't at some point build the fort and make a Millennium Falcon out of pillows or whatever, right? And and then or play with the action figures in a big world you've set up in your room or something like that. So yeah, I love what he's done with this.
And then you wrote a poem, which, I mean, I could easily look at every single poem with you because I think there's so much joy in all of them. Dad's Luke Skywalker figurine, were you channeling Mason and I for this moment? It's this great poem that is essentially, well, I'll let you tell it.
Sure. So, so this is one where the gist of the poem is that the dad has these mint condition unopened figures, presumably the original Kenner toys from the late 70s, early 80s, right? Though the poem doesn't get that specific about it, but he's got these perfect things in their boxes, and the kid just can't contain their excitement anymore. They open up they open them up and start playing with them, and then the dad walks in, right? And I tried to capture this moment of, it's a true moment. I hope it's a true moment that we've been in as kids and that we've been in as parents, for those of us who are parents, right? Where like the kid knows they've done something wrong. The parent is there suddenly hit with this moment of, oh, my kid has just done X, right? And now I get to figure out how to react to that, right? And in our not so great parenting moments, we don't react well, right? In our best parenting moments, we react with grace and kindness, right? And that's what this dad does. The dad doesn't yell at the kid. The dad doesn't whatever, the dad sits down and they start playing with these figures that the kid has now opened. Yeah.
The last stanza is, Dad walked in and saw me there. Total silence filled the air. I was guilty. That was plain. I could see I'd caused him pain. He breathed deep, got on one knee, then sat down and played with me. Who among us as parents that has, obviously people listening to the show have a pretty good idea what kind of collector I am. And I keep a lot of stuff in packages, but there have been times where Mason and I have been looking through my collection or going through stuff in the attic and sorting things. And I'll pull out a figure and he'll look at it and he'll say, Dad, and I'll have this moment, right? This moment that you're talking about so beautifully. And ultimately I let him open it. Now there are some I don't, of course. And for the record, Mason he's always listened to his dad. He's never opened up one off the wall or anything like that. But this is perfect, right? Because Star Wars captures that joy for us, but we have sort of different relationships with it as kids. And then we have different relationships with it as adults. So this one I really loved. I love this. I love so many of them, but this one is just, it's almost like you're a parent and a Star Wars fan in real life or something.
I am indeed.
Let's talk about, for sure. And it comes through on every single page. Let's talk about, so there are different links. The one about, I want to make sure I get the title correct, but My Pet AT-AT. Tell me about that one.
So this one was partially inspired by my own love of AT-ATs, right? And having the AT-AT toy when I was a kid, which sadly I don't have anymore and is gone. But it's also, a few years ago, I don't remember who it was. It was one of these videos that went around viral on the internet, and it was an AT-AT acting like a dog, right? Playing fetch with, but it's just jumping around and bounding. Whoever did the animation just did it wonderfully, and it was very playful. And so it sort of came out of that too, right? Of this idea of having your own AT-AT for a pet, which is, again, the sort of thing that a kid might imagine having. And this is just sort of one of those nonsense poems, right? There's not a unlike Dad's Luke Skywalker figurine, right? There's no real lesson here in this one, right? It's just like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be awesome to have an AT-AT for a pet? And so and yet, of course, it is all taking place in our in our galaxy, right? So it's about the cats running, screaming when they see the AT-AT, and the kid, like he says, and he'd stomp when the mailman walks by, right? Which is, of course, only going to happen in our galaxy. But the kid also says the AT-AT would lick the kid if the kid lost a limb, right? Which is a thing that tends to only happen in the Star Wars galaxy, or at least far more often. Right. So, anyway, so yeah, it's just sort of that thing of entering the imagination of a kid, and my own thing of I just love AT-ATs. I think they're so cool.
Oh yeah. we're like of that age, right? Where The Empire Strikes Back and everything about Hoth and everything in that particular movie is it. That is our wheelhouse. We also learned that AT-ATs and in the Ian Doescher universe are potty trained.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, the best ones are. I'm sure there are some that struggle with it, and you have to get your AT-AT potty pad or whatever. Yeah,
you got to extend grace to them. Yeah, no,
right. That's right.
This is another one that completely captures the spirit of what you're doing with your love of Star Wars and language, and then combining that with Shel Silverstein, which is just really, really great. Was there a specific poem in here that was based on a specific Silverstein poem?
No, not exactly. And that was partially intentional. I didn't, we're not trying.
We're not aping anything.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And also this isn't in a very different way from Shakespeare Star Wars, where I'm very much trying to sort of be in the style of William Shakespeare. This is more like these are Silverstein-esque poems, but I'm not trying to rewrite Shel Silverstein poems. Exactly right. That's not what I'm doing. But there are things, that I would say I sort of took from his world, right? Like his poem, "I'm being eaten by a boa constrictor," right? Where like the last line is, "Oh heck, he's up to my neck. Oh dread, he's up to my," right? And like all of a sudden, yeah. And so that is similar to the very last poem, where now I will say that the very last poem in the book. And again, this is, like of course Lucasfilm, chooses their edits, and they are one step back from Shel Silverstein on the naughtiness scale, I would say, right? And so the very last poem in the book is called "Writing This Poem on Top of an Acklay," and the idea is that the poet, in this case me, right, is in fact writing this poem while on this huge beast from Attack of the Clones, and at the very end was originally going to be, I mean, you can tell because the last stanza is, "Oh drat, I just fell off the back of the Acklay. I'm nervous and filling with dread. It's standing above me. It looks rather hungry." And now in the book it says, "I should have just stayed home instead." But you can notice that rhymes with dead, right? And so I think the original line was something like, "Oh darn it, I think that I'm," and then it was a dash, and that was it. That was right. With the implied rhyme. So so that sort of idea came from Silverstein, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's a perfect example of how you got to go to that line, but we're not going to quite go to that direction.
Exactly.
So there's just so many things to ask you about. Some of my favorite ones are like the really short ones that are the pages are a different color, and there's no illustrations on them, but they also have kind of a bit of a fun little punch. I love Trash Compactor because it just sounds like something a kid would do.
Yeah.
It would just tell us about that one.
So again, I'm pretty sure that's one that started off with the idea of like, okay, let's comb through my memory of sort of some of the most famous moments of Star Wars, the most fun moments of Star Wars, right? Okay, the trash compactor scene, right? So how would that then, I mean, the question then becomes, okay, if you're going to do a poem about the trash compactor, how does that end up playing into what a kid might do, right? And so I had the idea that, the kid is trying to recreate the trash compactor scene. They're trying to play trash compactor, but they can only do it if they use real trash. I mean, otherwise, how is it going to be, and I don't remember which page it's on here. Oh, there it is, 31. Yep. I got it. Yeah. So and just like you said, it's a very short poem. I'll read it. It's called Trash Compactor. My dad yells, "May, what have you done?" He bursts in with a crash. But how can I create the scene unless I use real trash? Right. And so everybody knows exactly what has just happened. Right. The kid has trying to recreate the scene, play the scene, and there's trash all over the place.
It's perfect. And you can picture, like, I can picture us doing this as kids, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just getting it out and just having fun with it. There's just so much joy in every page. It's impossible to read this. And I think I text you this. It's impossible to read this and not smile because it's so delightful. Of course, man. So I got to ask you, obviously you wrote these poems and they have a special place in your heart for various reasons. What did it do for you when you saw the illustrations that connected to each poem?
Well, as I said before, Tim's work, it brings such heart to it. And I tried during as I was writing some of these poems, like with every poem in my manuscript, I included an illustration idea. And I would say that Tim took my idea on maybe a third or a quarter of those. And then on the rest, he let his experience and imagination and expertise rule the day, and ended up with something far better than what I would have done. I, who am not an artist of the drawing kind. So he just has captured everything so well, and the mix that they've done of black and white and color, where in a lot of illustrations there are just certain elements that are in color. I don't know. It just it felt like this thing that had been sort of deep in my own heart had actually managed to touch somebody else, and like it just deepened my love of this project that much more to see these illustrations.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
With travel beginning to open up and Walt Disney World and Disneyland reaching full capacity, this is the time to book your Disney World vacation with MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation, time, and dollar. I use Becky Menken and MEI's incredible services all the time, both for family and for travel for the show, because of their no cost, no obligation quote when you use the service. Plus, they proactively adjust a booking if the rate goes down. Literally, I will wake up one morning and I will get an email from MEI saying that the price went down, and I will get a refund sent to my credit card right away. I don't have to do anything. They help your family enjoy everything Galaxy's Edge and the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer. Can help you plan every detail and always share invaluable tips. That's for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or other cruise lines. It doesn't have to be Disney related. They literally can help you plan a vacation anywhere on the planet. Be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel and sign up for a free no obligation quote to any of the Disney theme parks on the planet or any vacation that you have in mind. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out me and Coffee with Kenobi in the process. Was there, and maybe this is, so I'm putting you on the spot for this one, but is there a specific poem that when you saw Tim's illustration for that poem, it elevated the poem in your heart? Like it made you love your poem even more because of the illustration and it just kind of hit you?
Yeah, I think there are probably a few of those. And the one that I think I would say maybe most is, let me find it here. But it is Princess Leia and Grandma Shmi. Right. So this is a poem that sort of occurred to me. This is not a line, a lineage that we think about, I think, a lot necessarily. Right. But of course, Shmi was Leia's grandmother. Right. And so the idea of sort of like, well, boy, what would it have been like if they'd ever known each other, right? And he's drawn such a sweet illustration of the two of them together, and it's just, yeah, I think it's really lovely. Yeah, what
it is. It is really, really cute, and there's emotion because I hadn't thought about that relationship either, or like not that relationship because they don't ever actually get to meet, but. Yeah, I love it. See, it adds to kind of your enjoyment and the way that they're looking at each other, and you've got the twin sons. I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's exactly. And that's also one where, just like actually the Trash Compactor poem, this is another poem where I worked in a name that is personal to me, right? So the second line of the poem is, "They would have been as thick as thieves, like Grandma Beth and me." Beth is my mom's name, so she is Grandma Beth to my kids.
Right.
So it's one of these instances where I need a single syllable name, right? So why would I not work in the name of somebody I know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So knowing you the way that I do, I know you like to hide Easter eggs in your poems. Are there any fun little Easter eggs here?
So I think most of the Easter eggs, there actually are not nearly as many as there are in something like Shakespeare's Star Wars. The Easter eggs in this book fall into two categories. One is the names of people I know, and mostly that's kids. I dedicated this book. The dedication is to my children and their friends, to my friends and their children. And so a lot of the names that I've worked in here are my friends' kids or my kids and their friends, and so that's one thing. The other thing is that I did try, as I was writing these poems, and I wrote there are just a little over 76 or 77 or something like that poems in this book, but I wrote more than 200 total.
Wow.
So there's a cutting room floor with a lot of poems strewn about on it. And one of the things I tried to do was investigate and learn about a lot of different types of poetic forms, that some of which I had played around with and experimented with in the past, and some of which were entirely new to me, where I was sort of learning how to write this poem as I did it. And so some of those made it in. Hopefully kids aren't going to, kids aren't going to be like, oh, that's a villanelle, but it might be the sort of thing that if a teacher uses it in the classroom, uses this book, they'd be able to say, hey, that poem you like, it also happens to be this type of poetic form. So that's the other thing that, we don't emphasize it. We don't talk about it in the book. They're just there. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the fun things about it. Cause with my day job, there are certainly those things pop into my mind. So you can enjoy it for that, or you can just enjoy the joy in the language itself, which is a complete celebration of Star Wars and innocence and joy. And it's marvelous. Surely, I'm guessing your kids love this as well.
I'll be really honest with you and say that I don't think my junior and senior in high school have read it yet, but hopefully they will. I have their names are. There's a poem called Ingrid is Chewbacca.
Yes.
About a little girl who is the best Chewbacca on the block of all the kids playing Star Wars. And Liam and Graham, my kids, their names are in that poem, and Ingrid is in fact a good friend of Liam's. So I know they've read that one, but yeah. Anyway.
Oh man, your grandkids are going to eat this up
someday.
I hope so. Of course they will. No, Mason loved it too, very much. So if someone said to you, "What's your favorite one?" I don't really like that kind of a question because it's hard to pick that. But are there certain ones that mean a little bit more to you, that just for whatever reason? And maybe we talked about them already.
Well, one of my favorite ones is okay. I'll give you two. I'll give you one that is for I'll give you one that's for a sentimental reason, and one that's for I just think it's a fun poem, right?
Perfect.
So the sentimental reason is The Beasts Inside, and it's the idea is that this child, when they are feeling scared or when they're feeling nervous about something, they call on these beasts that they have inside, right? And it's the three beasts from Attack of the Clones, from the arena scene, the Ackley, the Reek, and the Nexu, and so the idea is that she has these beasts inside her that she can call on, and that's it. Actually, was somewhat inspired by Sandra Boynton, the children's artist who's most famous, I think, for her greeting cards, but she also has done all of these. She's done 4 or 5 children's albums where she actually has gotten quote unquote real musical performers, right? Like sorry, I'm forgetting who some of them are. She has one album that there are a lot of actors. So Meryl Streep does a song, Kevin Kline does a song,
Oh,
Laura
yeah,
Linney
yeah.
does a song. Yeah. And then there are other ones that have actual bands doing songs. Anyway, there's this song called Dragonfire that she has that's about, the kids' dragonfire that they have inside them. And so that was sort of the idea behind this poem also. And so for me, that's wanting kids to remember, because a lot of kids live through a lot of really hard things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to remember that they have this thing inside them that they can call on, that to me was an important thing to include in that. So that's the sentimental one. The fun one is Broccoli Night, which was one of the first poems I read. And basically the idea is that when the kid's mom makes broccoli for dinner, and the kid doesn't like broccoli, the kid sort of pretends to be Jabba the Hutt, and the piece of broccoli is a Gamorrean guard, and the Jabba feeds the Gamorrean guard to the Rancor, which is the dog under the table, and hides it from his mom, and ends up getting dessert, So I liked that one.
That's very fun. Did you know? I don't think I've ever told this before. I told this on Facebook Live. I was supposed to tell on the regular show, so I'll tell now. But I'd seen The Empire Strikes Back in theater several times in 1980. But one night we were having dinner, and we were having our meal, but broccoli was one of the side dishes. And my mom and I just was sitting there, and I wasn't eating it. And my mom said, "If you don't eat that, we're not going to go see The Empire Strikes Back." So I took it and I put it in my mouth, chewed it, smiled, and she goes, "Okay, go wash up or go to the bathroom before we leave." So I went in the bathroom, took a piece of toilet paper, spit the broccoli in the toilet paper, and flushed it down the toilet. And I went to The Empire Strikes Back. That's probably the most dishonest thing that I've ever done, and I'm not proud of that. But I'm glad you brought that one up, because it just kind of reminded me, how Joseph Campbellian, that we're all this collective unconscious, we're sharing these shared ideas of Star Wars.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, first of all, randomly, I love Lemonade on Jakku. I think it's adorable.
Thank you.
Cute. But tell me about Halloween. I feel like Halloween is super charming, but I feel like the end is kind of profound too.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So
I found depth in that one for a lot of reasons.
So that's interesting. The idea with the poem Halloween, which again is that great example of blending our galaxy with Star Wars galaxy, right? Basically, the kid is saying, oh, I saw 19 Darth Vaders and 13 Princess Leias, right? Everybody's dressed as Star Wars characters on Halloween, and so the last couplet is many characters to see, but there's only one of me. And it's interesting that you took that in a sort of profound kind of way, because this is one of those where my illustration idea, which I remember very clearly, didn't make it onto the page. Now, what made it onto the page in Tim's drawing, again, is a kid dressed up as an Imperial probe droid. And so presumably the idea is that the kid is the only Imperial probe droid out there among all these other, sort of more typical characters that you might see. My idea was that there was a kid dressed up as the Sarlacc pit, right? And so maybe even one step more sort of ridiculous. But I love that you picked up this resonance of like, the kid feeling unique in this moment, right?
Yes.
Regardless of how he or she is dressed up, right? They are feeling like there's only one of me. It's that same, I mean, it makes me think of that same thing of like every time a kid plays hide and seek, they're terrified they won't get found. Not terrified necessarily, but they want to be found, right? Which is why if you play hide and seek with a kid who's 5 or 6 years old, right? Pretty quickly, the kid will start making lots of noise intentionally. Will start giggling. Will start, we'll let you know where they are, right? And it's because kids at that age want to be found. They want to be seen, right? So that's what that makes me think of when you say that, right? Is like that sort of sense of personhood and uniqueness. And I love that. It's great.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, no, it's just like that. And I think that's what Star Wars does for a lot of us. It gives you a voice. There's a sense of empowerment and identity within that. And in the sea of all these other Star Wars costumes and creatures and denizens of the galaxy trying to scour the block for candy, right? The kid can finally say, you know, but I'm me, right? It's empowering, and it's also, there's a sense of belonging there. And I feel like Star Wars does that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and it also is like, how many of us and how many people in the world, right, have found their place in the world because of Star Wars, right? Because they're finally like, here are my people. Here, you know, like, this is what I've wanted to do, right? Yes, I'm gonna go to a place where I'm gonna, you know, dress up in a costume, and everybody's gonna look at me and be like, you look awesome. That is so cool. Can I take my picture with you? Right? Like, and that's what Star Wars does. Like, that's the community that Star Wars builds around this thing that we all love.
Perfect.
Who knew that was all hiding in this little poem?
That's right. It's so good. Where does it say it? Is it in the introduction? I remember reading somewhere about how it's funny and it's also a little bit profound as well. Where was that? Maybe that was something that Quirk sent as like one of the things they sent out for media things. But yeah, that's it. This book is so charming. It's so fun. It's so engaging. You'll love it as an adult. You'll love reading it to your kids, your grandkids. But it's also got those little moments where you can have those conversations, which is good. Before we let you go, my friend, I got to ask you about, because it's such an exciting week for you, William Shakespeare's Avengers: The Complete Works. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is the 4 Avengers movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, rewritten as plays by Shakespeare, just like Shakespeare Star Wars. And so it's a single book, but it's 4 plays, so it's a much bigger book than my typical book. And it's illustrated by the wonderful Danny Schlitz with these just astounding comic book level illustrations that of course all have the Shakespearean twist to them. And this was one that where Marvel approached Quirk and said, we want to do a Shakespearean Avengers, and we want your guy to do it. So that was a huge honor for me, yes. Right? And so, it was super fun to work on, and super fun that they're both coming out on the same day. It feels like just too much good fortune for one person.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends, as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, Contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZairCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi.
Your cup runneth over, but you deserve every ounce of success. Marvel, I'm guessing Marvel said, we want that Deadpool comic book writer. We want him.
Right.
We want him.
Yeah.
Well, Ian, it's been such an absolute joy and a privilege to chat with you. Of course, you were certainly welcome on Coffee with Kenobi anytime. We're so excited and impressed by the continual love and devotion you put into not only language, but Star Wars in general. So thank you for all you do, man. You're certainly a light in the galaxy.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. And thanks again for having me on.
Of course. Please let everybody know where they can find the book and where they can reach out to you and get in touch with you on social media if they want to ask you a question or continue the conversation.
Yep. So the book should be in your local bookstore. And if not, it's in places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Powell's.com for sure. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, my own website, iandescher.com. And I'm at Ian Doescher most places. Or I have a unique enough name that if you search for me, you'll find me.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.